This week on the show, Amazon reports a strong first quarter. Etsy reports a weak first quarter. And eBay, they're just kind of hanging around. What is up, Galaxians? Welcome to episode number 245 of the Galaxy CDs, Rocks, and Flips Reseller Talk podcast. My name is Ryan, and I will be your host as we look at a few other news articles, but mostly this week we're going to talk about the quarterly reports that the platforms all announced over the last week. Some good news for some of the platforms and some pretty awful news for one of the others in particular. And then at the back end of the show, I'll have a very, very tiny What Sold recap. Again, if you're following me over on Instagram at Galaxy CDs Rocks, you already know this. Last week was kind of soft here. 83 sales, 83 listings sold. The dollar volume was actually pretty good, but there just wasn't anything really all that huge and interesting. So I've only got, I think, 5 maybe things to share with you this week, though one of them is actually pretty good. So we'll get into that in the back half of the show. You may have also noticed that I've begun again to leave timestamps in the description. So if you want to go to a particular part of the video, there are timestamps down there, and you can just go. If you just want to see the what sold and you don't care about this reselling news, you can do that. There will be timestamps. I'm trying to remember to do that. I had done that forever ago. And I got lazy, I guess. I kind of got away from it. So anyway, that'll be down in the show notes and the video description below. Let's get into this reselling news.
News updates.
So Amazon is just continuing to crush everything and everyone in their path. Amazon grew U.S. sales 12% in the first quarter of 2024. This article is over on e-commerce bites, and as always, I will link to these in the show notes and the video description below. Amazon grew North American sales 12% year over year in the first quarter of 2024 and grew international sales by 10%. North America sales comprised 60% of their net sales mix. International business was 22%, and Amazon's AWS Web Services business comprised 18% of the net sales mix. And that is a business that I've talked about on this show on numerous occasions that continues to be an increasingly important piece of their business. They do a ton of stuff there, and it is highly profitable, and it's up to 18% of their net sales mix. Amazon saw worldwide paid units grow 12% in the first quarter compared to 8% a year ago. So even comparing to what would have been considered a pretty good performance last year, this year was even better. Third-party sellers continue to be a big contributor. They accounted for 61% of worldwide paid units in the first quarter. And again, that is an increase versus last year when it was only 59%. So that business also continues to be very important. So I guess the moral of the story is Amazon is relying less and less on actually being the company that sells you stuff. They rely on their third-party sellers and their web services division to generate a significant portion of their business. They also revealed in their earnings report that the number of people that employed full and part-time at the end of Q1 was up 4% year over year, which is interesting because they had gone through some layoffs. At the end of last year's first quarter, their headcount was 10% lower than it had been in the first quarter of last year. So there has been some growth there. Amazon, they say, wants to keep corporate headcount growth flat, but it is still hiring selectively in some areas of the company, including, as everyone, is generative AI. CNBC noted the growth of Amazon's advertising business, digital advertising, a business that's made Meta and Alphabet two of the most profitable companies on the planet, has become a booming business for Amazon as well. Ad revenue increased a whopping 24% to $11.8 billion in the first quarter versus $9.5 billion a year ago. Amazon's CEO, Andy Jassy, was quoted in the release saying it was a good start to the year across the business, and you can see that in both our customer experience improvements and financial results. The customer experience thing they're talking about is the big push for being able to do one-day and same-day delivery to more delivery zip codes. We're going to talk about that a little bit later in this show. They did make some changes to their low inventory fee, and we're going to cover that here in a few minutes as well. The combination of companies renewing their infrastructure modernization efforts and the appeal of AWS's AI capabilities is reaccelerating AWS's growth rate, which is now at $100 billion annually. Our store's business, he said, continues to expand selection, provide everyday low prices, and accelerate delivery speed, setting another record on speed for Prime customers in Q1. I apparently am the exception to the rule because I ordered something that was supposed to be delivered Thursday, and as I sit here Saturday morning, I'm still waiting for it. He goes on, while lowering our cost to serve and our advertising efforts continue to benefit from the growth of our stores and Prime Video businesses, which they're also making a little more money on now because they are serving ads in those, or you have to pay an extra, I think it's $1.99 a month to go ad free. So they just continue to find ways to eke out additional bits of money from essentially from everybody, from buyers, from third-party sellers, from advertisers. Mad props to them, I guess. You can't do anything but be in awe of their performance. It's very early days in all our businesses, and we remain excited by how much more we can make customers' lives better and easier moving forward. There is a link here if you want to go read the full press release on their investors page. So big results for Amazon in the first quarter. They continue to just grow in pretty much every category that they choose to enter. However, Etsy is not having quite as good a time of it. This article is on The Motley Fool, why Etsy stock took a dive today. Etsy reported another round of weak sales in the first quarter. The business, they note, is struggling to grow in a post-pandemic world. Guidance indicates the recovery will take time. The e-commerce stock delivered another disappointing earnings reports. The shares of Etsy were heading lower today when this article was published. It was down 13.9% as of midday. This was midweek when they made their announcement. I believe it was on Wednesday. Flat revenue growth, and most importantly, a decline in profits. Etsy was, this article points out, a pandemic success story, but since then the business has seen virtually no growth, and we've talked about that in these quarterly recaps for the last probably year and a half or 2 years. They've tried all kinds of stuff to generate growth. They've bought additional companies, they've sold additional companies, they've tried new ad programs. They're trying all kinds of stuff, and they just don't seem to be able to get much traction. Gross merchandise sales, which is their key metric that represents the total value of goods sold on the platform, fell 3.7% to $2.99 billion, impacted in part by the sales of LO7, the Brazilian online marketplace that it sold last August after having bought it just a couple of years earlier. That investment was, in hindsight, really bad for them. They overpaid for that business. We've talked about this on this show as well. They paid far too much for it at the time. They never figured out how to make that business profitable. They sold it for a massive loss to generate some cash, and now it's affected. Even though it was not a highly profitable or didn't have great sales results, it's still impacting their business to this day. That was a massive misstep that they just continue to pay the price for. The other thing, obviously, to look at is the contrast. Now, obviously, they're in completely different markets. The only thing they really share in common is that they're online marketplaces. Etsy is much more of a specialty, handmade goods, vintage items, where Amazon is the global shop for everything you want. But the fact that Amazon was able to generate a 12% increase at the same time Etsy was dropping over 3.5% is pretty eye-watering for what's going on over at Etsy. Revenue, they note, did tick up 0.8%. That's 0.8% to $646 million as the company benefits from higher fees. And that essentially matched the estimates of $646.3 million. So the higher fees thing, again, their offsite ad program that I was complaining about pretty vociferously last week, and the just general raise in their fees and their reliance on more advertising revenue, be it directly through their cost per click model or through these offsite ads, continues to kind of help their revenue stay at least in the ballpark. In addition to all that bad news, they're not really attracting a lot more buyers, but man, are they attracting a lot more sellers, which is not good for probably any of us. Individually, active buyers only slightly increased by 0.9% to 96.4 million, though active sellers jumped 15% to 9.1 million, which they say is a positive sign. It may be for them, for the company at large, but I don't know that it is for any individual seller. And I'm not completely convinced that it is for them, because I still think a lot of these sellers are kind of not to be whatever, the counterfeit Chinese knockoff artists that are just finding things online and creating them super cheap over in China and flooding the market. And I don't know that long term that benefits Etsy all that much. You can let me know in the comments down below what you think of my take on that, or what your opinion is of what's going on over at Etsy. Gross profit improved by 3%, but operating expenses rose by 6.4%, which led to a 1.4% decline in adjusted earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, 167.9 million. Earnings per share fell 0.53 to 48 cents, slightly below the consensus. CEO Josh Silverman said, "Our first quarter performance, while in line with our guidance, was pressured by the challenging environment for consumer discretionary product, which continues to be headwinds to Etsy marketplace growth." Again, somebody had commented on one of my videos or one of my Instagram posts about if things went south with the economy, I think I talked about this in the Q&A episode a couple of weeks ago, if discretionary income becomes even more constrained, which are the sites that are most likely to get hit? Etsy is probably in my opinion, most exposed to that, because their items are almost exclusively non-essential. They're artisan items, decorative items, special old, like in my case, vintage books. Nobody needs a book from the 1800s to get through their day necessarily. Where obviously a site like Amazon is going to continue to do well, even in a tough economy, because they sell everyday essential items. eBay, as we'll talk about here in a minute, is kind of in the middle of those two things. So this whole situation really, I don't personally think that Etsy is in any particular trouble. Their results are not great. It's going to hurt their stock, but the last I saw, they had massive amounts of cash on hand, so I don't really expect any of that to be a potential death knell for Etsy. But as I've said here before, I would not be at all surprised if we see another bump in the fee increase, which would run obviously counter to what mercari has done, but would not probably be something that would surprise me totally. The article goes on, "Can Etsy recover their guidance?" Wasn't particularly inspiring either. The article says the company called for a similar decline in gross merchandise sales in the second quarter and expected a modest improvement in GMS growth in the second half of the year. It also said full-year adjusted EBITDA margins will be at least the same as 2023. So they're projecting probably flat performance for the year. Again, if you're a shareholder in Etsy, that's bad news. If you're just a person selling over there, as long as they can continue to attract eyeballs to the site, it may not be that bad, but it's certainly, shareholders are displeased, to say the least. Etsy's excuses, the article continues, about weak consumer discretionary growth are starting to ring hollow. As I just pointed out, Amazon just delivered solid e-commerce growth in its first quarter earnings growth, with a 7% increase in first-party online stores business. That's their own stuff that they're selling, and faster growth in its third-party seller services. Other discretionary businesses seem to be turning the corner. Etsy has a strategic plan to turn the business around, but investors aren't going to buy into it until it starts to show results. At this point, that doesn't appear to be on the horizon. So let me know what your thoughts are on Etsy. I still am doing really, really well over there. This week was not as good as the previous week, but it still outperformed mercari by a pretty wide margin. I'm still very pleased with my individual store's performance over on Etsy. You can let me know your thoughts. eBay kind of splits the difference. They're not doing great. They're not doing terrible. They grew sales by 1% in the first quarter. eBay grew sales, gross merchandise volume, by 1% in the first 3 months of 2024 to $18.6 billion. Revenue was up 2% for the same period. So that's kind of their income. So I wonder how they managed that. Here you go. eBay's first-party advertising products delivered $370 million of revenue in the first quarter, what the company said, which was up 30% on an as-reported basis. Total advertising offerings generated $384 million of revenue in the first quarter, which is 2.1% of gross merchandise volume. So they're doing better than 2% of their total sales is just in advertising. That's fees that you and I as resellers are paying for Promoted Listings Standard, Promoted Listings Advanced, their new offsite ad program, and the various selling fees and so on and so forth. So that is a significant piece of their business that is just on the back of us as sellers. Their CEO was quoted as saying, first quarter results marked a strong start to 2024 as we continue to make progress toward our goal of sustainable GMV growth. We believe our accelerating pace of innovation is fundamentally changing the selling and buying experience on eBay, generating better outcomes for customers, increasing productivity across our organization, and ultimately driving more value for shareholders. They are making a ton of changes. We've talked about them pretty much at each of their quarterly updates. They're rolling out more things with AI to help entice new sellers who are a little bit intimidated by how hard it is to list on eBay. They're doing a lot of other things. They're updating the app. Some sellers apparently have now got Terapeak on their mobile. I have not yet seen it on mine. There's no update showing in the Google Play Store for me, but some sellers are showing that they have that, which is a huge, huge win for sellers. So they are implementing some things that should help their seller platform grow, which in turn should, of course, help their buyers increase. So they're trying. Their chief financial officer, Steve Priest, was also quoted, Q1 results highlight the resilience of our marketplace and business model amid persistent challenges in the global economy. Again, they're blaming global economic headwinds, inflation, recessionary pressures, not to mention the political climate and the upcoming election. He goes on, we exceeded our outlook across our key financial metrics and made significant progress against our long-term strategic objectives. Revenue, as I said, was $2.6 billion, up 2% on an as-reported basis. GMV, $18.6 billion, up 1%. Net income from continuing operations was $439 million, which was 85 cents per diluted share. They generated $615 million of operating cash flow and $472 million of free cash flow. And here again, they returned $638 million to shareholders, including $499 million of share repurchases and $139 million paid in cash dividends. So it's a good time to be a holder, apparently, of eBay stock. So there you go. That's kind of the results, a good, a bad, and an ugly, or a good and a mediocre and an ugly, I guess. eBay just continues to plug along doing what they're doing. Amazon just continues to grow at just an extraordinary rate, and Etsy just continues to struggle. Moving along, this was an interesting one. This is over on E-commerce Bytes, taking eBay feedback ratings personally. Many people who buy and sell on eBay take feedback ratings personally. I generally don't, but I mean, I like getting good feedback as much as the next guy, but it doesn't hurt my feelings. Comments can be stinging with often no way to get them removed, but it isn't just the ratings and comments themselves. Some get upset over etiquette, as demonstrated by a recent post on the eBay discussion boards. A buyer described her disgust at sellers who don't leave reciprocal feedback and proposed the eBay feedback policy be changed so that in such cases, buyers would be able to remove their feedback within a certain amount of time. This person has entirely too much time on their hands, in my opinion. I don't get that at all. I would not, if I leave feedback or a review on an item, I don't go back later and look to see if they've left me feedback or reached out. I don't care. I left my feedback. If I had a good experience or a bad experience, I told them what I thought of the experience, and I'm getting on with my life. This, to me, is bonkers. You can let me know in the comments on YouTube what your thoughts on this. I just think that's insane. I talked about it last week. I think the feedback thing is broken anyway. Mine, for my part, I have automatic feedback set up. As soon as a buyer pays, I leave automatic feedback, positive, which is, of course, all you can do at this point anyway, just so I don't have to deal with this, so I don't have to see the number popping up of how many things I need to leave feedback on. I'm just not interested in messing with it. If they've paid, that to me is pretty much the extent of their obligation. if they leave me a neutral or negative feedback, if I'm waiting until I get that before I leave them feedback, that just gives me an opportunity to leave retaliatory feedback, which is, I think, why eBay did away with it anyway. That's another matter altogether, but continuing on here, I would like to see a change in eBay feedback policy, she said, that would allow for a person to remove feedback within a certain time if they so choose, for whatever reason. This change would not allow for changing a positive feedback to a negative, for example, but would allow a buyer to be able to remove the positive feedback that was left if the seller is not going to reciprocate. Again, I don't know why a buyer cares about their feedback unless they are also a seller. I don't look at buyer feedback before I agree to complete a transaction. Maybe I should, I don't know, but I don't care. If they've paid, I'm shipping. That's pretty much the end of the story for me. It doesn't affect me. Why should a seller benefit so enormously when they can't be bothered to take the time to reciprocate to the person doing them a positive favor, let alone purchasing that from them? Again, I don't know who this person is, but I wholeheartedly disagree. I suppose, again, the feedback rating gives a potential buyer a general idea of the quality of a seller that they're dealing with. And if I, as a seller, have good feedback, that is a benefit to me. But just accumulating feedback for the sake of accumulating feedback is, for me at least, irrelevant. There would, of course, be a time limit to take this action, and as I stated, no ability to change positive to a negative, but the ability to remove positive feedback that raises a score if this is not reciprocated. Of course, many people responded, as I am here, and most, if not all of them, disagreed with the buyer's suggestion. The buyer said they believe that the time they take to leave positive feedback comment benefits sellers enormously. That premise was questioned by some of those responding. One said positive feedback from a buyer was a quote-unquote trivial benefit to sellers. Buyer said they often receive messages from sellers encouraging them to leave positive feedback if satisfied with the transaction, indicating that feedback left by buyers for sellers is valuable. I don't solicit feedback. Now, I know eBay does that sometimes on our behalf because I have gotten some messages where customers have said, please stop asking me for feedback. And I have to tell them, I have never reached out to you. I do not reach out to anyone asking for feedback. I wish more people did do it. My take rate on feedback is maybe 35 or 40% of all the stuff I sell. Again, it's fine. It's not that big a deal to me. I'm surprised at the number of people who don't actually leave feedback. But I'm not chasing feedback on 80 to 120 transactions a week. I got better things to do with my time. The original poster also wrote, since feedback is all voluntary and as several have stated, not a big deal, okay, then taking away is no big deal either, right? I don't disagree with that. As I said last week, they could do away with the feedback system entirely as far as I'm concerned and just show, if they want to show some performance metrics, show eBay's seller ratings. Are you a top rated seller? Are you not? Are you below standard? Call those folks out. I had a post on Instagram this past week. Again, if you're following me over there, I was doing some research on a Korean language book that I picked up, and I found it at a seller whose positive feedback rating was like 19.7%. That, to me, seems virtually impossible. And they had 40-odd thousand feedback, so it's a big, big outfit. It looks like, for all intents and purposes, they just hadn't shipped anything in months, if not longer. It looked like a company, not an individual, so I don't know, but that would be an instance where that person's seller ratings alone would probably be enough to dissuade people from making purchases. So let me know what you think of that in the comments. Somebody had reached out that they also thought the feedback system was broken, but I would be curious what all of your takes are on feedback. One poster also pointed out eBay doesn't allow sellers to leave negative or neutral feedback. If a seller could leave true feedback, I'm sure more sellers would leave it. Again, my take on that is what true feedback is there? Once a customer is paid, as a consumer, as a participant in my business, that is essentially the extent of their obligation. If they then come back later and try to scam me on a return or whatever, that's another matter altogether. eBay should be doing more to police the site and get rid of those kinds of people. But there's too much opportunity, in my opinion, for sellers to just retaliate against buyers who have a complaint about an item that is justified and they just feel aggrieved by it. It goes back to the whole thing where sellers don't want to take returns. For me, and again, this is just my opinion, that's part of the cost of doing business. If a customer has a bad experience and wants to leave negative or neutral feedback, that's unfortunately that's what they're going to do. I try my darndest to head all that off at the pass by making sure my listings are accurate. They've got good photos, good descriptions, all the little boxes are checked, everything is done. So there's no question when a customer gets an item that it was what they thought it was, and that my level of service meets or exceeds their expectation. And over the last 2 years, I literally have one negative feedback, and that one was fraudulent. So we'll just leave it there. You can, again, let me know down in the comments what you think of all that. This is a weird one, and I did not experience this. This is another one of those, and I was talking to somebody last weekend, my friend Brandy, who was having a hard time doing listings over on eBay over the weekend. And there are just some things that happen on these sites that are one-offs or happen to limited numbers of people. This is another one of those. eBay hides sellers' other listings in the mobile app. When shoppers on eBay's mobile app look at a seller's listing, they can scroll down and see a link to the seller's other listings. Starting as early as Tuesday, sellers found that the counter on that displayed 0, which misled buyers, of course, into thinking that the sellers didn't have anything else for sale. I didn't see this particular issue on mine, so I don't know. The article continues. It's a pretty big problem, especially if sellers are paying extra for store subscription fees or advertising fees to get shoppers to a listing, hoping that they will then look at the rest of the store, only to have them hit the back button instead of potentially viewing their other listings. A seller reported the issue on Tuesday on the eBay discussion boards. There were no notes on eBay's dedicated thread to technical issues as of last week. And when I checked this again, I didn't really see anything on it. Let me know if you noticed this or had any problem. It's just another one of those weird little intermittent glitches that eBay has that affects some people and not others. It's really weird how that works. But yeah, that would be a problem if it looks like I don't have any additional merchandise for somebody to buy and I've got nearly 11,000 listings. I'd be a little hot about that. So we talked about this a couple of months ago. Amazon was implementing a new low inventory fee, and they announced it, I believe, in February. It was going to go into effect in April. By the time they got to the end of March, they decided to give people April essentially free. They were going to credit everybody back for this fee so that they could get an idea of how it was going to impact their business. This is for Amazon FBA sellers. Now they've made another announcement on May 1st that they're changing how they calculate this fee. Amazon announced changes to the new low inventory fee that is instituting this month for sellers who use FBA. A reader told us the biggest and best thing here is not charging the fee on items selling less than 20 pieces in the previous week. This will allow me to continue my slower moving items without the fear of this silly new fee. So one of the big things that people were having an issue with was seasonal merchandise and items that get discontinued. When they become low in supply, this number, of course, if I can't buy any more of this thing because they don't make it anymore or it's out of season, of course, at some point, my available inventory is going to dwindle below my historic, whatever it was, 28 and 90-day sales history. And it would trigger this fee, which would either force you to withdraw all of that inventory or just eat the fee. It was a really, really tough situation. And to their credit, Amazon has come up with a solution to this. Again, if the item sells less than 20 pieces in the previous week, it will not have this fee. The update said in December 2023, we announced our plans to launch a low inventory level fee to improve inventory health and maintain sufficient inventory levels. Having sufficient inventory that is spread across our fulfillment network ensures that we have enough product close to customers so we can deliver it faster. And again, that goes back to wanting to be able to do one-day or same-day delivery essentially everywhere in the country. We've seen that when products have sufficient inventory levels, they will, on average, generate measurably more sales. On April 1st, the low inventory level fee went into effect, and we announced any low inventory level fees, that's a mouthful, charged in April would be credited back. They're now extending that transition period through May 14th. So you're going to get another couple of weeks if you're an FBA seller. By May 31st, you'll be credited back for any low inventory level fees incurred between April 1st and May 14th. We hope this transition period has helped you get more familiar with the fee and fee management tools. We've seen that the additional time has enabled even more sellers to achieve healthy inventory levels to avoid this fee entirely. So a lot of sellers bought and shipped in more stuff to avoid this fee. The other side of that, of course, is that FBA has a storage fee, and you've got to find that balance between having too much stuff in there and not enough stuff, because you're going to pay fees at both ends. So it's a really challenging thing for FBA sellers to get their arms around and manage. They pointed out 3 things that they're making changes to because of the greater unpredictability in managing inventory levels for seasonal, end-of-life, and other low-volume products with varying demand. Starting May 15th, so the day after this trial period ends, the low inventory level fee will not apply to products that have sold less than 20 units in the past 7 days. So that's the big win. Low inventory fees incurred due to excessive inbounding and processing time caused by Amazon or Amazon Managed Services will also be credited back to you by the 15th day of the following month. For instance, May charges with excessive inbound delays will be credited back by June 15th. Again, it's a bit of a lag there that is not ideal, but at least they're recognizing that when the bottleneck to getting that inventory into the system is them, that you should not be paying a low inventory fee for something that they were responsible for. So good on them for that. The last change they made, Prime Day, is an important sales driver for your business that is coming up soon, and we want to ensure that you're set up for success for Prime Day 2024. We'll provide a time-bound exception to the low inventory level fees for products that are included in Prime exclusive Lightning deals and Best deals. The fee exception will apply for the 4 weeks following Prime Day, when inventory levels may be more unpredictable based on what you sold during Prime Day. So if you've got an item that is super hot on Prime Day, you do it in a Lightning deal and you sell out of them and you can't get them back in stock fast enough, they're going to give you a 4-week window to recover your inventory without having to pay this fee. So again, good on them. We appreciate your partnership as we continue innovating for you and our shared customers. We're committing to providing you the right resources and tools so together we can get products to our customers faster than ever. So if you're an Amazon FBA seller, let me know what you think of that. I give Amazon a lot of credit. When the bulk of their sellers have an issue with something, they at least make a good faith effort to resolve it, which is something I don't see all the time from some of the other platforms. It can be very difficult to even, like Mercari, for instance, is really bad. My personal experience is trying to get assistance over there is like pulling teeth. It's very hard to get even individual assistance, let alone on a global thing like their recent change with returns and so on, to admit that they've made some sort of mistake and make a change. So again, let me know what you think of that. Last thing in the news this week, the feds say millions of parcels from China sported fake postage. You wonder why postage is going up every 6 months? Here's one of your reasons. A California woman pleaded guilty on Friday to defrauding the United States Postal Service of $150 million by allegedly using fake postage to ship tens of millions of parcels to customers that came to the U.S. from China-based logistics businesses. I would say it's no longer allegedly. She pled guilty to it, so it really happened. That's bound to make sellers fume given the high cost of postage for domestic shippers. Sellers who have access to below market shipping costs can lower their prices, giving them an advantage over other sellers. Someone commented on a story I did within the last couple of weeks about the price increases at USPS, and they commented about this discounted rate that these Chinese companies are getting to ship stuff into the U.S., and that needed to go away. Here again is another glaring example. Not only were they eligible for this discounted fee, they just faked the postage altogether. Amazing. The Department of Justice said the defendant, who has been in federal custody since her arrest in May of 2023, so she's been in the pokey for a while, pleaded guilty to 1 count of conspiracy to defraud the United States and 1 count of the use of counterfeit postage. The DOJ alleged that she and her co-defendant provided shipping services, including the shipping of packages via U.S. mail, for China-based logistics businesses from at least November of 2019 to May of 2023. So a fairly substantial amount of time, 3.5 years this was going on. Further alleged that the defendants printed duplicate and counterfeit net stamps that may be purchased online from third-party vendors and printed onto adhesive paper. So like Pirate Ship or Stamps.com or any of those that you might use, they had found some way to print duplicate and counterfeit ones and use them. Pretty remarkable. Starting in 2020, Chen and Hu began affixing counterfeit postage to mail they presented to USPS for delivery. They received parcels from the China-based vendors and others, applied shipping labels showing postage, purportedly paid, and then arranged for the parcels to be transferred to the United States Postal Service facilities to be shipped across the nation. The shipping labels were fraudulent and frequently included, among other red flags, intelligent barcode data recycled from previously mailed packages, according to the court documents. This data is used in some postage shipping labels to evidence the payment of required postage for the item. So I guess my question would be for Mr. DeJoy, if you happen to be listening, how did this happen for 3.5 years? If they knew this was going on all this time, why did it take so long to get it stopped? They knew these barcodes had previously been used. Man, oh man, wild. Doing the math for one 5-month period, the defendants allegedly sent an average of 6.8 million packages a month with counterfeit postage. 34 million parcels total, $150 million in losses. So, wow, just crazy. There's a picture here. Again, I'll link to this in the show notes and the description below. You can see kind of the stuff they're talking about that was fraudulent on these labels. They've scheduled a hearing at the time. The defendant will face a statutory maximum sentence of 5 years in federal prison for each count. So, man, it's hard to be honest. I guess eventually these people get caught, but man, the amount of money they made over that amount of time is just staggering. Anyway, let's get on to this, what will be a fairly brief What Sold recap. So again, not a super amazing week from a number of transactions sold or even a number of big items sold. It was a fairly decent week all in, a lot of $15 and $20 items, which of course add up, and it, financially it ended up being a pretty decent week, but just not a lot of big stuff here to share with you. I mentioned in the last episode that I was trying to negotiate a deal for an estate buyout. That deal did come to pass. It ended up being roughly 750. I think it was 754 books that I picked up for $150. So that is a really good deal. I'm really pleased with that. A lot of interesting stuff there, old vintage. The guy was either a psychologist or a psychiatrist. So there's some really old textbooks there. He was Korean. So there is a big amount of Korean language books, which I'm trying to wade through, which has been really interesting to I use Google Translate, and you hold it at one angle and it says it's one thing, and you hold it at a slightly different angle and you get a completely different result. So if there are any readers of Korean among my listenership, send me a message because I could probably use some help. Anyway, this first item sold over on eBay, George Washington Carver, Man of God by Alvin D. Smith. This was a second edition printing from 1961. It was signed by Alvin D. Smith. I initially put this at auction because I couldn't find anything like it. I started it at, I think, $15.99 just to see what it would happen, and nothing. Nobody even looked at it. So when the 7 days elapsed, I listed it at fixed price. I put it at $24.99 or best offer. I got an offer of $21, so all is well that ends well. This was part of a big lot I've talked about of the Seventh-day Adventist stuff and religious books I picked up for $1 a piece. So this was $1 turned into 21. Moving over to Etsy, Apocalypse, The Great Jewish Revolt Against Rome by Neil Faulkner. This was an illustrated hardcover, I believe, from the 1970s. Did not have its dust jacket, but otherwise was in pretty good condition. This was part of the big 15,000 book lot, so I'm into this thing for less than a nickel. It sold for $37.99, plus, again, media mail shipping. So these were cool. I talked about this sale a while ago, and I was having stuff every week from this sale. That the one that Cincinnati Picker had done this sale was a scam video on that I had just made out like crazy at this sale. So in that lot of stuff, at the bottom of a box were these, there were a couple of these, Calcula's Level Up Fantasy, Dojin by Fred Perry, graphic novels from 2013. Both, there are trade paperbacks with dust jackets, And I don't know if these maybe were at like a convention or something, but both of them have an autograph and a drawing by Fred Perry on the dust jacket. I have two different ones. The main cover of the book is the same. The dust jackets are actually different. I paid $1 a piece for these at that scam estate sale. This one just sold over on eBay for $59.99. I'm trying to remember what I paid at that sale. I think I spent a total of $40 at that sale and got, I don't know, 80 some items total. I mean, it was, again, everybody's experience with these things can be different. The kind of stuff I'm looking for apparently was different than what John, Cincinnati Picker, was looking for, because I've made a killing from that sale. And here's another example. Another old book. This, I think, actually was from that same sale. This is a paperback, first printing, Battlestar Galactica Paradise by Richard Hatch, who was one of the stars of the original Battlestar Galactica way back in the day, and Brad Lineweaver. From 2004, first printing paperback in immaculate condition, no creasing, no nothing, no damage whatsoever. Really, really difficult to find book. Again, it's an item I own for $1. This sold for $59.99 over on eBay. And the last one, your flip of the week here, if you're watching on YouTube, you see it says Line of Battle Private Listing. So this gentleman lives down in Georgia. He has purchased multiple lots from me of antique books and collections of magazines. So I had these eclectic magazines from 1859, 1860, and 1861. I picked these up at an estate sale. There was a box of 20-odd hardcover bound magazines. I talk about bound magazines fairly regularly here, and I like them. I like them a lot. So these are super, super old. The books themselves, the bindings were leather. The printing was still pretty good. A couple of them, the leather was flaking off pretty bad, but I had 7 of these that I had listed. Eclectic magazine from 1859, 60, and 61. So 7 volumes. I think it was 2 collections each in these books, bound magazines. I'm into them for like $2 a piece. I had them listed for $24.99 or best offer. He sent me a message, as he usually does, and says, hey, I'm looking at all these things. What would you do for me if I bought them all? So I told him I was at $24.99 each. I would do $20 a piece and combine them, of course, into one box for one shipping. If that was acceptable to him, I'd prepare the shipment and send him a link to a private listing that he could buy. It's not really a private listing, but when you create a listing that says Line of Battle Private Listing, it's not something that's going to show up in many people's searches. So you can be fairly confident that nobody's going to buy it out from under him. And to his credit, he buys them almost immediately. When I send him a message, usually within an hour, he's made his purchase. So these 7 bound volumes of the Eclectic magazine, which is originally printed in England. These were the U.S. versions of those from way back pre-Civil War era. Really cool old magazines with some interesting illustrations in them. Sold for $140 on a initial investment of $2 a piece, so $14 into $140 plus shipping. I will take those kind of deals all day long. So that, my friends, is going to put a wrap on this week's episode. Thank you again to everyone who came out Thursday for my live Q&A and explanation about how I do my clearance sales. Let me know in the comments down below. I'm toying with the idea. I've started doing these kind of how-to tutorial videos. I've got a list here of 3 or 4 things that people have asked about that I'm going to do those videos, but would you be interested if I continued to do those Thursday mornings at 11 a.m. Eastern as a live show? Let me know in the comments if that's something that you would participate in. We had a really good conversation, some really great questions there. So if that's something that you would like to see continuing going forward, let me know in the comments to this video, and I'll think about whether I want to do those as pre-recorded videos or continue to do them live. I also introduced a new series that came out. By the time you hear this, it will have come out a couple of days ago. That came out on Saturday. Messages from the past. We all have, if you're a book and ephemera seller, I've got dozens, if not hundreds of yearbooks and collections of postcards. And there's some really interesting stuff there. And I decided it would be kind of interesting to just do little short 5 to 8 minute videos where I will essentially have photos of these books or these postcards and just read the various messages that people sent to each other. So if you would do me a favor and go check that out and let me know what you think of that. That actually is a lot harder to put together than this episode, which is fairly straightforward. I just sit here and talk. I don't have to do a lot of editing. So go check that out. Let me know what you think of that. Let me know what you think of the live. As always, thank you for spending a little bit of your time with me. If you got something out of this, do me a favor, hit that thumbs up button. Let the old YouTube algorithm know that this was a worthwhile use of both of our times. And now it's time to sell. Thanks, guys. You have been listening to the Galaxy CDs Rocks and Flips Reseller Talk podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will catch you again next time.